and welcome to the 920 podcast. I'm your host, Logan Quinton. I'm here today with Charley Collier. We're here to kick off opening weekend for Tennessee baseball.
I'm excited. I'm excited. College baseball is glorious. It felt like last year and really the last couple of years it really started to pick up more momentum from a national perspective. And I think nationally it feels like this is the most buzz for a college baseball season that we've seen in a long time, with some of the big names that transferred and the two-team race. It feels like at the top, and just all the other storylines. I can't wait. Friday, February 17th. Can't get here soon enough.
No, you're right. And what's the difference is between this time last year and now, I think our first or second episode, we were talking about the Vols and we placed bets on the Vols to win the World Series at like 30-1 and 35-1. I think they I think they may have opened at 50-1 preseason. I'd have to go back and look. But I would make that bet over and over and over and over again. I mean, that thing quickly turned into, you mentioned it, all the media and all the hype surrounding that team last year. Once it got into conference play, you could tell something was different, and they never let up. And this year, the Vols, and we're going to talk about it towards the end of the podcast. The Vols are around 5-1, 6-1 odds to win it all, depending on where you look. Some books have them as the head-on favorite after some news out of LSU has trickled out about one of their star pitchers. We can touch on that. But yeah, it's the Vols are at the forefront of the sport, of the betting boards, and it's gonna be different. This team's going to look different. So let's get into it. Let's talk about this lineup, Charley. What we think it might look like for you viewers on social media. We'll put this spreadsheet up, this little chart we got. This is my projected opening day lineup. And it's merely just that. There's got to be a lot of variety in terms of the order this year. I really like the left-handed bats. That's the one thing that sticks out to me. There's a lot of new faces. We know about the transfers, Zane Denton, Maui Ahuna, Griffin Merritt. We had him on last episode. And, he talked about some of the younger guys, new guys coming in and seeing guys like a Chase Dolander. And it doesn't have to be pitcher, hitter, but like just the level of play with some of these guys that were already here is elevating the game of some other guys that have just stepped into the program. I think that's going to be huge. But as far as the lineup's concerned, man, it starts with the leadoff spot, and that's so important in the college game. Even if you have a good lineup, good hitters and sluggers in there, if you don't have a leadoff guy that can get on base at a high rate, that's not explosive, it's gonna make a difference. And the Vols, I think, will see Christian Moore at leadoff more often than not this year. That's my guy. I think Maui Huna is totally capable of playing that role, but we've heard Tony V hint at Christian Moore being that guy. And he didn't have an extremely large sample last year, but he had 118 at bats. That's enough for me. 300 average. He hit 10 homers and drew 27 walks. I think that's a great spot for him. And then followed by Dickey. I think when Dickey's healthy, I really love him at the 2 spot. Best hitter on the club behind the leadoff guy. And then I got your guy, Charley, Zane Denton, the switch hitter of the bunch at third. Then Blake Burke, followed by Maui Ahuna, Griffin Merritt, and then a couple of lefties, Kyle Booker, Christian Scott, and then Charlie Taylor. So I've got Christian Scott manning center, and Kyle Booker in left. Those are guys that have been in the program. Uh, Two outfield spots are definitely in question. You know, does it go to Christian Scott, Kyle Booker, the veterans, or do you look at some of the darling freshmen that Tennessee has in Reese Chapman, Dylan Drayling? Uh, I, I don't know, but this is what I would go with at least to start things off with against Arizona. That would be my guesses for who's going to man center, who's going to be in left. We know what the infield is going to look like, but the catcher position, that's the biggest question. That's the one everybody's asking. Who is going to catch? I think we're going to see all three catchers. But if I had to give a nod to somebody for opening day, just the opening day, I'm going to go with Charley, a guy who's been there, caught some of these guys, especially receiving a guy like Chase Dolander. What say you, Charley?
Yeah. So first of all, great job by you with all your charts and your previews and your stat collections that we have going on here. I agree with you. I like Christian Moore in that leadoff spot, and you pointed it out. 27 walks a year ago, in just 118 at bats. Even as a young guy, I thought that he had the plate discipline of a veteran. I thought he really did a good job working at bats. I thought he did a good job just, spitting on pitches he had to, tough takes all around. And that's why he was able to work those walks. But that's a guy that I like setting the table for you, frustrating that pitcher early potentially and just getting on base. Then I'm with you. Your best pure hitter in the 2-hole with Jared Dickey. Uh, I'll be interested to see what his follow up is after this tear that he got off to last year before that foot injury. But if he's hitting like he did a year ago, which I expect him to, that's a great one too. You feel very confident that in the first inning, one of those two is gonna figure out a way to get on, and that's a great feeling to have as a coach. With Zane Denton in the 3-hole, that's a guy that I could maybe see dropping down in the lineup a little bit more. I like Burke at the 4. I could see Merritt at 3 or Ohuna at 3, but Denton there at the 3-hole for now works. And then, yeah, you said it. Two of those 3 outfield spots up for grabs. I think you lean on the returners, the veterans, Booker and Scott early. But I think those guys are probably going to get their jobs taken. I mean, that's kind of the nature of that position right now for those two. You're telling them, hey, don't let we're trying. We want someone to take your job, right? We're playing for somebody to take that job from you. Your job is to play well enough where no one does. Then conversely, you're telling Drilling and you're telling Chapman and you're telling Colby Backus and you're telling these other guys, your job is to go take that job in left, that job in center field. So the outfield competition in general going to be really interesting. I mean, even this weekend, 3 games coming up, bet you see 3 different outfields, and that's something that Griffin Merritt kind of hinted at us too. Hinted to us too. You're going to see a lot of competition in the outfield. And then catcher. That's the big question mark. I tend to agree with you. I think it'll be Charlie Taylor early, but I think that Cal Stark is really going to end up being good enough to kind of take over that position. I think you're going to see some Jared Dickey, though he'll probably primarily, be in that DH spot. I think that Dickey actually probably takes over one of the outfield spots more often than not, too. I think you'll see him in left some. But I think it'll be Charlie Taylor to start. Cal Stark, I think, will end up being the better player. I think he'll end up taking that job. But there's a whole lot of depth. Whole lot of depth. And you mentioned it too. Tennessee is in a unique position where, the development of their position players is a process that can be expedited compared to other programs because of how deep this pitching staff is. Chase Burns, Chase Dolander, Drew Beam, those guys can't throw every day, just like other teams 1 and 2 and 3s can't throw every day when you're, inter squatting, when you're having live BP, etc. But what Tennessee has that other teams don't is that pitching depth. So those batters get challenged each and every day. And, Griffin Merritt, again, he kind of hinted at this too, mentioned it a little bit too. I feel like Tennessee's hitters might even start the season in a better spot than most of the country.
Yeah, absolutely. And you hit on it right there at the leadoff. Christian Moore with the walks. Put this into perspective. So out of the 2022 stats from these guys, Maui Ahuna was the leader in 2022 with 28 walks out of this bunch. And Christian Moore had one less and almost half as many at bats. Maui Ahuna 202 at bats, and Christian Moore just 118. So, and then you look at the power and the gap to gap ability that he showed, the explosiveness in the fall. Man, it looked like he put on a healthy 10 pounds, and he looks so good. So I really love him at the leadoff. And my theory behind the top of the order there, you get your lefty, the best hitter, to come behind Moore, and then a switchy. So you get all that in the top of the order right away. And then your cleanup guy, Blake Burke, you can clean the bases and then have a leadoff type of hitter in Ahuna backing up Burke that also has pop. And then from there, Griffin Merritt, veteran guy, he's going to be somewhere in the middle, in the thick of the lineup. Can't wait to see what he does, but really, really love the lefties. I mean, look at all the lefties on the bench. Even guys like Logan Chambers and Ethan Payne. But you mentioned, I really do think, I agree with you, Charlie. Reese Chapman, Dylan Drayling, number one out of Colorado, number 2 out of Kansas. Those guys are pretty special. Dylan Drayling, I think he would be my pick, but they both have their qualities. Chapman more of the raw power, compact type. Drayling at the plate. They're both lefties, but Drayling, his swing kind of reminds me a little bit of Max Ferguson, where it's he's got easy power. It's some holes in his swing, but when he connects, it's easy power, and I think that's going to play eventually. Just a matter of when.
I think the biggest question maybe with the outfield is what kind of role does Colby oh, pardon me, I got oxygen stuck in my throat there. What kind of role
Y'all bothered.
Colby Backus have? And that to me is like a big question. I feel like you haven't heard a lot about him this offseason. You know that he went to Tennessee and you know that he's been in that outfield competition. He was excellent at Walter State. I got to see him in person many a times broadcasting Walter State baseball last year and the year before. I mean, just watching him again, like from his time at Walter State, that feels like a guy that can step in and contribute right away. But I just don't really know how much momentum he's built in his time in the Tennessee program. So I'll definitely have an eye on that.
He's a bopper, man. He no denying the power and the ability there. Yeah, that's going to be one to watch. He's a couple of him and Cal Stark are JUCO guys, and it's going to be interesting to watch them. Let's turn the page to the bullpen. This is going to be interesting. Speaking of lefties, I really love the lefties out of the pitching staff. I think you're going to see a lot more of that this year. Do we see the same weekend rotation? Dolander, Burns, Beam. I tend to think that's not concrete at all. I don't believe. But Chase Dolander, Friday night is his. There's no question about that. That's who we're going to see against Arizona on Friday night. So after that, the obvious 3, Dolander, Burns, Beam, the guys with all the accolades, it gets interesting with guys like Xander Sechrist, Seth Halverson, Camden Sewell. Those guys are starter material. they also can be weapons out of the pen. So how the club manages guys that I just mentioned, those three, and then I'll bring in Wyatt Evans. If I had to pick a couple of names out of the pitching staff for folks to get excited about that will be kind of new showrunners, so to speak, it would be Wyatt Evans and probably Andrew Lindsay. I feel like most Vol fans by now know of Seth Halverson. They haven't seen him, but they know of him because when the pitching staff got all the run that they did last year, analysts and media kept saying, "Hey, you think this is good? They've got another guy that can throw, another hard thrower that's out there on ice that's going to be available next year." So, but yeah, Seth Halverson probably will ease his way back into the season, I would think, and considering his past. But yeah, Andrew Lindsay, Wyatt Evans, what do you make of this? How they're going to manage some of these arms?
I'll tell you what, Tennessee just needs to start playing 2 midweek games. Like
Yeah,
Tony Vitello next year just needs to double up on midweek games. I know that's not actually a possibility, but it's quite the conundrum. You have too many guys and not enough innings. I don't know if I've ever seen a pitching staff this deep. I mean, Sechrist, Halverson, and Camden Sewell could make a Friday, Saturday, Sunday for a top 25 team. Like, not just any random SEC team, like a top 25 team could be successful with that as their Friday, Saturday, Sunday rotation. And then on top of that, those guys kind of long relievers, starter hybrids, whatever you want to call them. But, like you mentioned, Andrew Lindsay and Wyatt Evans, the guy that I'm really excited about is Bimby. But, you have your guys that you already had around, too, that are going to step into bigger roles with Fanning and Fitzgibbons. And then I'm also kind of excited to see what Zach Joyce has in the tank. And then how could you forget good old volley fingers, as you have it written down, the better looking version of me,
the modern day Paul Bunyan.
I have no idea how you manage these innings. I really don't. And it felt like that was almost kind of an issue at times last year for Tennessee. The bullpen rarely ever had to get used. You did use them just to keep them fresh, but you had a lot of your big-time relievers that weren't really put in a lot of high-leverage situations until, like, April. It was crazy. But I'll tell you what, yeah, I'm obviously, you could talk for days about that top three, but I'm really excited to see what emerges out of this bullpen. Because I think that between Lindsay, Evans, and Bimby, one of those three, at least, maybe throw Zach Joyce in there too, one of those four, I think you're going to have a big shutdown arm emerge out of this bullpen that you can put in that closer spot. You can put in that setup spot. Don't know who it's going to be, but I think it's going to be one of them.
Yeah, I 100% agree. My only question there is, does it get to a point where, they don't have a primary closer? Everybody's so good that you could, like, come conference play. Now, early on, you're going to see all kinds of wacky stuff in terms of usage and experimental stuff to get to that point where conference play rolls around and, man, it's everybody's good that you're playing week in, week out. And I could see a scenario where Wyatt Evans could come in and close out 3-4 innings at the back end of a game against LSU, or Seth Halverson could come in and just shut down the back end of the game for a few innings. And so did they kind of just mix it like that, or do they give the role to a primary guy? I think if they give the role to one guy and say this is your role, because there's clearly not a Redmond Walsh this year. if I had to pick, it would be Seth Halverson. Just because he's going to fill up the strike zone. He's a hard thrower. But like you mentioned, there's plenty of options if you want to go that route.
I understand that there's different ideologies and how you approach, the bullpen and the back half of the bullpen, and whether you want to have certain roles set in stone or whether you want to play it by ear, play it by matchups, play it by rest, whatever else. In the college game, you see roles a little bit more undefined a lot of times. Maybe I'm a little old school. I don't know. I like having like this is your closer. I like having specific roles for players. Maybe you don't need it so much as like here's middle relief, here's long relief, here's your setup guy, here's your get out of the jam guy, here's your closer. But I think by the time you get an SEC play, I would prefer if you settle on a specific guy to be your primary closer, like you had with Redmond Walsh last year. Obviously, you get into a situation where you need a closer Friday, Saturday, Sunday. You might not use the same guy 3 days in a row, but I would prefer to have a closer settled on come April.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to watch, see what develops there. Man, those. Let me pull it back up again. I was trying to do something here. The lefties, I just can't get over it. Like you mentioned, Bimby. He's a lefty option. He had what was it like? It's on the notes that's not on the screen, but 132 strikeouts in just like 82 innings at Wabash and JUCO. I mean, that's just insane. So, man, they got a bounty of weapons. It's just a matter of figuring out who kind of the cream that rises to the top and then just managing. I mean, they've got the best pitching wizard in college baseball. So I think we're in good hands there.
That almost feels illegal to have this many talented arms and then let Frank Anderson coach them.
I can tell you, speaking of rotations, another rotation that you can rely on is Crumble Cookies lineup. Week in, week out, Crumble Cookies is putting out, a Tennessee baseball type of rotation. And so we're gonna bring in the weekend rotation segment. We touched on it there before doing the segue, but we'll kind of do it a little different. I've got with me here the Chase Dollander of Crumble Cookies as a part of this week's lineup, their Valentine's Day lineup. They're going with one of their variations of an M&M cookie, and those are, man, they're to die for. It reminds me of Frank Anderson when Chase Dollander come onto the team from Georgia Southern, an All-American freshman. And we were thinking, man, what kind of project is this going to be? Because we saw he had the ERA was like at 4, and is real nice guy, real nice freshman to bring into the bunch and into the mix. And we're thinking, oh, what can Frank Anderson do and change with Dollander? And he said, man, just throw your stuff. They can't hit it. So if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I'm going with my favorite for this week. Original M&M's Candies Valentine's Day cookie. This thing is like, it's like the size of my head. I'm going with it this week. But they got some other features. Chocolate covered strawberry, confetti, chocolate caramel, and New York cheesecake to go along with their milk chocolate chip. So that's the lineup for this week. Does that sound any enticing to you, Charlie?
I'll tell you what, that M&M Valentine pink candies I saw it on your Twitter too. I thought about going to Crumble to get me one of those. That looked incredible. The one that you were just holding up. That one and the chocolate chip. I'm a sucker for a good chocolate chip cookie. I'm a simple man. Much like Frank Anderson told Chase Dolander, throw your stuff, they can't hit it. It's the same notion. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. That's the chocolate chip cookie for me. It ain't broke, don't fix it. Just give me chocolate chip cookies. I'll eat them. I'll eat them. And Crumble, man, they can make a chocolate chip cookie. I'll tell you what. They can make a chocolate chip cookie.
Folks, if you're in Knoxville, go check them out. 6672 Clinton Highway, Suite 104. There's another location on Parkside Drive in Turkey Creek, West Knoxville. And be on the lookout for a new location in Maryville coming soon. So let's get to what do you want to hit on next, Charlie?
I think I want to hit on. Did you just say Maryville?
Yeah, we got some folks listening that are probably like not from the South, so
you just lost like every one of our listeners that lives in Maryville.
Merville. If that's any better, if that's any consolation.
Too late. I think they already turned us off.
Let's touch on the teams this weekend out in the desert. We've got the Vols will be playing Arizona on Friday, Grand Canyon on Saturday, and then University of California, San Diego on Sunday. Which matchup are you looking forward to the most, Charlie?
Man, I'm interested to see Chase Dolander against Grand Canyon, just because they're. I mean, who doesn't want to watch Chase Dolander, right? But I think the obvious answer when you look at like which game you're looking forward to most is that Arizona game. I mean, it's the Friday night. It's the season opener. It's a team that, made it to the Coral Gables regional last year. They ended up losing in blowout fashion in their final game of that regional against the eventual national champions Ole Miss. But
Are you there? Charlie went down.
I still hear you. Am I back?
Yeah, you're back. You cut out for a second.
Yeah, that was weird. Anyway, Arizona is my pick. I don't know where I cut off, so I'll just leave it at Arizona.
Yeah, Arizona, obviously, that's probably what people are going to point towards. For me, don't get me wrong. Like, any day that you get to watch Chase Dolander is a blessing. But I'm looking forward to Grand Canyon. That game is going to feature two of the best infielders in the game. Maui Ahuna, Tennessee, and then Jacob Wilson, Grand Canyon. And Grand Canyon is a really good program. They're a fun bunch to watch. They are around 100-1 odds to win the World Series, which is right up there. Like it's close to where Georgia is priced. It's ahead of a lot of other SEC teams. This is a really good Grand Canyon team. The Lopes will, they will not go down quietly. I mean, I think they're going to have a good performance in the desert. And then Sunday, UC San Diego. It's when they very, very first announced this, I thought it was University of San Diego, or San Diego University. I can't remember which way you said it, but that program is really good. But this program, UCSD, excuse me, the Tritons. I don't know what the hell a Triton is.
The Triton is like that. Wait, no, I think I was thinking of a trident. A trident. Huh.
Their logo is kind of like a pitchfork, almost like it kind of reminds you of the Arizona State Sun Devils pitchfork. But it's their third year playing at this level. They won 24 games each of the first 2 years. So I expect Sunday. That's going to be a fun one. Like a bunch of these guys are going to play, man, and a bunch of these young guys. That's a game where like Chapman, Dylan Drayling, dare I say, a Colby Backus gets in there and gets a couple of knocks, man. That'll be fun. But the Arizona game Friday night, the first one, Arizona picked fourth in their conference in the Pac-12 by coaches. I don't know if I go that high. They are. I do put them in the top half of the league, but obviously Oregon State, Stanford, way ahead of them in class, in my opinion. It's West Coast ball, man. You outside of the aforementioned Stanford, Oregon State, they're going to have the pitching. Everybody else in the Pac-12 just, I don't know. The pitching just isn't quite there. Arizona, their best player, Chase Davis. I don't know if you remember him. He had some monster home runs last year. One of them was a walk-off against Arizona State. He's a preseason All-American type. Really good player. He's going to be a fun one to watch.
Yeah, I saw that he's a top 50 draft prospect as well in terms of the MLB pipeline top 100. He's right outside of it. He was at 51 in the last one that I saw. Should be interesting. Gonna have to keep it down in the zone, obviously. Gotta keep that fastball down. I mean, we're assuming they're gonna keep it the same, right? You think it's gonna be Burns, Dollander, Beam?
Man, I don't know. I have no clue. Actually, there's some media availability going on as we speak. It's been crazy. We were actually supposed to get some, for the folks listening, we were going to be in on the call for the Desert Invitational, the media call, and they didn't cancel it, but they postponed it because of the events at Michigan State. And Michigan State is one of the teams supposed to be out there in Arizona, along with Fresno. Michigan State and Fresno were the ones Tennessee was not lined up against. So don't have any update on that, whether Michigan State will, travel or anything going on with that. But
I didn't even make that connection that Michigan State was one of the other three teams.
Yeah.
That makes a lot more sense.
Yep.
I wonder how that could affect things. Yeah.
Yeah. No clue. I looked before we started. I didn't have any update, but they did talk to Jared Dickey, Chase Dollander, and Tony V was supposed to be in on the call, and instead they grouped him with Dollander and Dickey in person. And of course, we've got this going because it's kind of do or die this week for us with the podcast. It's either now or never. So so you listeners out there, we chose you over Tony V. Charley, let's we touched on Arizona. I think expect the Vols to go 3-0. Arizona posits much of a challenge. I don't think. Maybe the Grand Canyon game gets a little dicey or something, but what I want to see the most interesting and the thing I'm looking to the most is, like I said, the young guys. There's a lot of new faces. Man, this time last year we felt like we were like, man, this is a new lineup. Yeah, we got Beck and Gilbert and Luke back, but what are these other guys? This year, man, 3 guys. We got 3 guys that return with 95 plus at bats. And when you look at 3 of the transfers, Ahuna, Denton, and Merritt, those guys equaled 650 at bats last year. Just those 3. So, and then the young guys in the mix. So, like, I really want to see these new faces, see how the young guys do. Is there something you've got circled or the one thing you're looking forward to the most this weekend?
There really isn't, one specific thing. It's just, I think, the collective baseball being backness of the weekend that I'm looking forward to. I'm looking forward to some guys wearing orange and white and sometimes gray and sometimes black, putting on some uniforms and picking up some bats and putting on some gloves and just playing one of the best sports to ever exist. I'm excited for it to count. I'm excited to see, like you said, what a new lineup looks like. I'm excited to see the different outfield combinations, the way that Tony Vitello manages that designated hitter spot. I'm excited to see Cal Stark. I think that's a guy I'm pretty interested in, and it'll be pretty cool to just see like Maui Ahuna in a Tennessee Volunteers uniform. I guess really the question would be like, what are you not excited about? And I think the answer to that is nothing. It's not a thing I'm not absolutely pumped for this weekend.
Are you okay, Charlie? It sounds like somebody's stuffing you in a trunk of their car.
That it sounded like that the whole time.
No, just now.
Oh well, that's good. It's promising.
Now, man, what? Hey, what if Wyatt Evan comes out and starts Sunday and strikes out 7 guys, 3 innings, and then Beam comes in behind him, and throws a few innings? Like, you think people like their heads will explode, or like they'll lose their minds and think like, what the heck's going on? I mean, do you expect any experimental stuff this early?
I mean, I think the early portion of the baseball season, by its nature, is experimental, right?
Yeah.
But in terms of experimenting with the rotation, I don't really think you're going to see anything experimental, at least this weekend. I think you want to start the season off with what you plan for your 3-day rotation to look like. I think you want to try to just get them in that early season rhythm and just kind of get settled in. So I think you'll go Burns and Dolander and Beam or whatever combination of those 3 it may be. Wouldn't surprise me in 2 weekends to see Wyatt Evans start a Sunday or to see somebody else maybe pick up a weekend start somewhere. But first weekend, a lot of experiments with the lineup and with the outfield, not so much the pitching rotation.
All right. There we have it. Let's talk about some futures, man. We can touch on, and we'll run through this board that I have, and it works well to talk about, the SEC or the college landscape as a whole in terms of some surprises you may have, some disappointments, but ultimately here, I made this for our investment opportunities. As you can see here, the book we're referencing, DK, these were prices and odds as of February 2nd, because February 2nd is when the coaches poll finally got put out there. So we get to reference some odds that were available February 2nd. Some of these have changed now, but also the D1 ranking, and then, like I said, the coaches poll. So, twos across the board for Tennessee. Once you get into the 10 to 15 range, that's when you start seeing difference of opinion. Who jumps out to you, Charlie, whether on the betting board or in the rankings, that you're either really high on, really low on, totally don't agree?
A team that I'm lower on than maybe it looks like nationally, it's Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt is, was 10th in one poll, top 10 in another. They're 15-1, some of the better odds in the country. I think a lot of that is related to their name, to their namesake in Vanderbilt. And I know that, Vandy's always going to have some pitching. They're always going to have some batting. Enrique Bradfield, I guess, is never going to graduate, I guess. But I'm not overwhelmed by Vanderbilt's roster by any means. I think especially now that they don't really have the same recruiting advantage they used to be able to have now that NIL exists. They used to be able to technically kind of sort of give more money away than everyone else. That doesn't exist anymore. Now they have a team in their own state that's better than them, that has been better for the last couple of years, that is more fun, that is more engaging, that is able to offer more. I think that there's been a little bit of a dip in talent. I think there's a dip in momentum. I'm not all that big on Vanderbilt, especially with just the rise in talent across the SEC. A team staying with the SEC. I didn't mean to go SEC here, but a team that I really like this year, a team I'm pretty bullish on, is Texas A&M. I think that's a really well-coached team. I think that last year they kind of ended the season ahead of schedule. They were playing some really good baseball. They came back a good bit this year. I like their pitching staff. And I think there's value there too. I mean, you look at the preseason polls, 5-4, but they're 20-1 in the sports book. That's one of my favorite middle tier plays. It's not necessarily a value play. It's not one of the favorites either, but I like A&M.
All right, A&M, the Aggies to be back in the mix in Omaha. That's an interesting one. For me, I really don't. And by the way, I get your argument for Vandy, because while there is a lot of potential with the arms, there's also a lot of potential for the lineup to just not really be there. I mean, you got EBJ, but I do like their lefty bats a little bit, but as a whole, it just doesn't seem like the same Vandy boy lineup that just gives you fits from top to bottom. Look, I was gonna give out a play here because when things opened up, Wake Forest 40-1. I was wanting to sprinkle on that. I think that's amazing value, but things have shortened up. They've been the biggest mover. I think they're at 19-1, maybe 16-1 in some places. You can get them at 25-1 right now, and I wouldn't be mad at anybody for taking that. It's just I don't think there's value if you're going to play it. If you think Wake is going to make it to Omaha without a doubt, then play it. But my thing was, doing these futures, you have to look at the potential for stock market type plays, cash outs, and things like that. With Wake Forest, they're going to have to deal with North Carolina, Virginia Tech, Virginia. I can see a scenario where those four teams just kind of muscle around with each other, the first month of conference play. And if that doesn't happen, if there's no separation, with Wake Forest would have to really separate themselves the first month of conference play for the 25-1 price to be worth a play, in my opinion, because it's really not, if they're going to be kind of what we think they're going to be, kind of in the mix in the ACC at the top with 3 or 4 other teams and similar records. If they go into region play, in that scenario, you're looking at 15-1 anyways. So I would rather at a 25-1 price with Wake Forest, I would rather hold off and just and back them. I think there's going to be plenty of opportunity to back them throughout the season because of that pitching staff. According to Prospects Live, they have the most prospects in this year's draft as a team. So I'm going to hold off on that for now, but it's not on the board. But I do have a play here, and it's going to be 200-1. I think South Carolina, they're as you can see, they're off the board here. We're going to try to figure out a different way to do these slides and these posts here. But South Carolina is ranked by D1. I actually think they're ranked in the coaches poll too. I can't remember. And it's not just because of that. South Carolina has potential to bounce back here. They had an awful year last year. No doubt about it. An awful year. They seem like they're trending in the wrong direction. But they have one thing going for them that you need in the college game, you need in the SEC, and that's pitching. No, they're not ranked in the coaches. So D1 is very high on them. I was actually kind of sad to see that, like, we had the same train of thought there. I don't know if that's a good sign or a bad sign. But South Carolina with Will Sanders, I really like him. He's such a good pitcher that kind of doesn't get talked about enough. I mean, they were so bad last year, it didn't really even matter. But they're going to have some guys back on the pitching staff. They have an exciting young arm that I think will be in the mix. Noah Hall is a veteran. It's veteran laden. You know, I really think they can kind of punch their way through the East Division. I mean, I've got them finishing fourth in the East. But if Vandy blows out a couple of tires, or Florida, you know, South Carolina, all it takes is one of those two things to happen. South Carolina is like top 3 in the East and, you know, maybe top 10 in the SEC. I really think that lineup's going to be a lot better. They get Casas from Vandy, the guy that kind of platooned at first base and everything, a big power lefty. He transfers over. I think he's going to be a perfect fit for the lineup. Michael Braswell, we talked about him last year on the pod. He hit a freshman wall, no doubt about it, but he bounced back, finished the year and posted some really nice numbers. He's a fantastic athlete. I think he's one of my favorite sophomores. Opinion with this play here is definitely kind of a stock market play at 200-1. I really, really, really don't think South Carolina. It's this thing's going to get cut in half. Like a month of the conference play, they're probably going to get cut down to 100-1. And if they, like I said, if they end up battling for like a third spot in the East, I mean, who knows? They could, if anybody is this year's A&M, I think it's South Carolina. I don't think that will be the case at like an Omaha run, but my prediction is South Carolina to have a major, major bounce back year.
I tend to agree with you on South Carolina. You know, you said this year's A&M. I agree. I agree. If there is a this year's A&M, I think it's going to be South Carolina. In terms of other, you know, stock market plays, that's also how I like to play the futures market. You know, you get in early, you cash out mid-season, cash out at the peak. Southern Miss, Texas Tech, and East Carolina are all right there together. 75-1, 75-1, 90-1. I think at least two of those teams you're going to get a better cash out halfway through the season at some point. Same goes for NC State at 60-1. I know they just lost Tommy Tanks. I think you're still going to get a cash out at some point this year. I trust that NC State program. If you want to go either further into the well, Liberty at 200-1. Wright State at 300 to 1. Maybe you get some value there. Maybe you get a cash out opportunity there eventually. There is one team I wanted to ask you about before, I guess, we wrap this up or anything like that. Mississippi State, they're 60 to 1. They're unranked in both polls. Seems like they're kind of being forgotten about entirely in this offseason, and maybe that's for good reason. You think they bounce back?
They are not finishing last in the division, which is where I think they're at. I can't remember if it was D1 or the coaches poll. Somebody had them finishing last, and I do not see it. I'm going to buy stock in Mississippi State. I don't know if I'll necessarily make that play, but I do think that they bounce back this year. And that the West Division, I'm not as high on Auburn and Alabama as everybody else, but I do think that Mississippi State, the pitching can only improve. I mean, they've got guys that can throw strikes. It's just a matter of I don't know, finding a rotation. The injuries early on last year killed them. You know, it kind of. I mentioned about a couple of teams in the East. What if they blow tires? Like Mississippi State, they had a tire blowout last year, and at the time, people didn't think they're like, "Oh, we can overcome this. We've got a lot of talent," and they did. But it's just one thing led to another. It seemed like, and just piled on the dogs. And you know, it was a honeymoon year, so I do think that they bounce back this year. But in terms of that range, you know, you mentioned 60 to 1, that price for the Bulldogs. I've got them highlighted here. TCU at 50 to 1. I really like TCU to come out of the Big 12. They're a sneaky bunch. I think at 50 to 1, insane value there, I think, because if they win the Big 12, you're probably looking at, you know, 20 to 1, anywhere from 20 to 30 to 1 odds come season's end. So that's significant value there, I think, if you want to. But this would be the TCU 50 to 1 would be more along the lines of letting that one ride. But the bunch that's around them, I'd have to take a pass on it. Auburn, Arizona. Like I said, if you believe that Wake Forest without a doubt will be in Omaha, I would do the 25 to 1. I would ride TCU to 50 to 1, and I'll let you know if I end up playing that. I haven't gotten around to them as a deep dive, but I will. But yeah, my play. You heard Charley's plays. I'm going with South Carolina 200 to 1. Probably just like a tenth of a unit or something. If you're $100 better, throw $10 on it. If you're $10 better, throw just $1 on it, man. It's I think there'll be some cash out options for it, and who knows if they're this year's A&M, man. You'll be rolling into the CWS with insane value.
If we're talking just bets, not necessarily even value, but just bets, what the only team that I'm looking at outside of the SEC in terms of any kind of futures at all towards the top of everything, you mentioned Wake Forest at 25 to 1, Oklahoma State at 25 to 1. That is going to be one of my two serious national championship bets. I'm going to take Tennessee, obviously. I'm going to take Oklahoma State. Both, I guess A&M can get included in that realm, but I'm going to take Oklahoma State, A&M, and Tennessee as my three. Probably going to ride these ticket out bets in terms of a national champion, ticket. And then, the rest will be value plays. I do really like Oklahoma State. I like the bats that they bring back. I like the power in that lineup. And I just kind of get a vibe that they're out for some revenge. They're out to find their way to Omaha this year.
Love it, man. Man, if like I said, if you were with us last year, you were riding the 35-1 ticket for the Vols to win everything. I mean, we had cash out options like 10x. But there's no way you catch that at like what we were looking at and dealing with. Like I said, I would make that play 100 out of 100 times. One of the best teams we've ever seen in the game, especially in the BB Core era. To have that kind of ticket, you just ride it out. But we'll try this again. We'll see. I promise you, more times than not, we will beat the line. We'll get some value on these plays, and we'll be back with more, on the episodes in the future. So for now, we'll wrap it up. Stay plugged in. Like I said, we were supposed to have some stuff for you today as far as coverage and quotes. That changed a little bit, but you listen to Fan Run, Tony Vitello will be on today. I don't know if we'll get the pod out today, so if you hear this, go back and listen to the Drive podcast. What is it, Charlie? They usually have V on hour 3, right? Usually like 5:30, so like halfway through the 3 o'clock hour, or the
he's gonna be on at 5:30.
5:30. Yep.
Which, if you're listening and you just hear Logan say today for us is Tuesday, February 15th.
Yeah.
Today for you might be different, but we're recording this Tuesday, February 14th, and Tony Vitello will be on the Drive at 5:30 on February 14th. Presumably, you're listening to this after February 14th, in which case I would encourage you to go listen to I guess that would be the hour 3 podcast for the Drive from February 14th, 5:30. So yeah, go listen to Tony V. I'm sure that Russell and Bear and Tony had a great time. It'd be really awkward if they didn't, and we're predicting this now and then something weird happens. But yeah, I bet they had a great time, and I bet it's a great interview.
Well said, Chuck. Yeah, that'll about sum it up for us, man. We'll try to be a little smoother with this stuff next time. But like I said, me and Chuck did not have a preseason, so I thought we did pretty good to get in there and rip it. Folks, thanks for listening. Stay with us. Stay tuned to the Fan Run airwaves. We'll be on Twitter talking about the games this weekend. Be sure to hit us up at LDQ Sports. And for Charley Collier, at C Collier 64. Thanks for listening, everyone.